Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel and to our weekend Q&A. Start your weekend the right way by getting all of your questions about history and social studies answered. For the next hour or so, I will be answering every question you have about history and social studies in as friendly and neighborly a manner as I possibly can. We do this every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, so join us for part 1 today, continue part 2 tomorrow, and then you can vote here on YouTube, exclusively on YouTube, for our topic, although we are on Instagram, TikTok, and other platforms. Where you can vote for the topic you would like me to discuss on Sunday for our live stream lecture at 4 p.m. Eastern. But join us today and tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern to get all of your questions about history and social studies answered. And here is the background we're going to use. This is a marketplace. It's in Russia in the late 17th century, so the time of Peter the Great, when Russia was going through changes and starting to turn itself into an actual empire and become more European, more Western. Peter the Great, of course, built St. Petersburg, the window on the west. He won major conflicts against both the Ottomans and the Swedes, which allowed Russia to expand and continue to grow its influence. But yes, so this is a Russian marketplace in the late 17th century, early 18th century, at the time Peter the Great was coming to prominence. I am a Russian historian by trade, so this is fun for me to put up as the background, but I hope you're all having a wonderful Friday, and yeah, if you like history and social studies, like and subscribe and become a friendly neighborhood historian. And Harry, my wonderful moderators here, my moderators will be holding down the chat, putting in social media handles, and answering any questions you may have about the channel, so kudos to them. But he's asking, what do you think of the Iroquois Confederacy? Obviously, one of the first major democratic experiments in American history was not the United States, but the Iroquois, who were a series of 5 different tribes, sometimes a 6th one, the Tuscarora, who would, the Oneida, the Seneca, the Cayuga, I'm trying to think of the other two, the Mohawk Indians were technically part of it. So the Iroquois, so it was an experiment in democracy where the Confederacy had the different tribes working together as part of one single nation to determine the future of their tribes, and they would send representatives. It's a really interesting experiment. So there's something about the Iroquois Confederacy. It lasted until the Americans and the British started to push them up out of the Great Lakes region and upstate New York, where they were ancestrally from. So, what was the height of Russian knights? Who did they fight? Each other, Mongols, Europeans? Did they ever interact with French and British knights? Not really. The Russians had a very feudal system, but did not develop a feudal knights, lords and ladies, and chivalry system. Russian feudalism was based on the landowners and the boyars and the nobles who controlled large swathes of land, and until the 19th century were predominant in controlling land and exerting their will over the serfs who were bound to the land. So Russia did not earn in serfdom, a practice that had gone out of style in Europe hundreds of years before, until 1861. But yeah, I'm a Russian historian by trade, and I have a Russian history series I'm doing currently, a Russian Tsar series. Go check that out. Check out my long-form videos that drop every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and all the short videos here that drop daily on the channel. And of course, the live streams, the Q&As Fridays and Saturdays, and then our live stream lecture on Sunday, which you can vote for. Nugs, good to see you. But yes, and we've got the social media handles in the chat. If you want to follow us on Substack, get my writings. Patreon, you can get early access to my First Lady series if you become a member there for a small fee. And of course, there's also my Instagram of other updates as well. So hopefully everyone's having a good weekend, and you're at the beginning of our Q&A, our live stream Q&A, where we will go for the next hour or so answering all of your questions in a friendly, neighborly manner about history and social studies. So it's always a pleasure to see everybody. Hopefully you're all having a really great week, and it's good, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. For those of you who have been here before, it's great to see you back and have you around. Drop a topic, question, comment, or issue you have about history or social studies that you want me to talk about, and I'll be happy to answer it. I don't think they were a democracy. I mean, there wasn't much elections or referendums or anything like that. Yes, but you've got a confederacy of native groups voting on decisions and making decisions as in a cooperative fashion. So for me, it's the earliest experiment of democracy, perhaps in a higher order compared to other American democracy that comes later. Who was the greatest person in history? You're in your opinion, of course. Greatest, typically. Greatest is very subjective. Most influential is also subjective, but I think most influential and greatest could be conflated. I think the most influential person in history has to be Jesus. I think you have the entire Western canon, the entire Western world, for better or worse, being built on the man Jesus of Nazareth, who his followers believe in his resurrection from the dead after he was crucified by the Romans. And I think that obviously changes world history exponentially more than any other figure. Of course, there could be some able candidates. Of course, you have Muhammad. So religious figures are going to be prominent, but you've got Napoleon, you've got Julius Caesar, you've got Martin Luther, you've got some of the most important scientists like Albert Einstein and Newton. you've got some of the greatest rulers in history, like I mentioned, Napoleon. So those are a few examples. But I think Jesus kind of takes the cake there. And the peace chiefs' war of camps and stockings were appointed by clan members, and there was not one case. Okay, thank you, Harry, for sharing that. Good to see you, Doctor Who, What, Where. So yes, if you have a question about history or social studies, be happy to talk about it with you guys. When did ancient China end? Ancient China is really kind of ends. So there's a mythical Chinese dynasty called the Xia. Then there's the Shang and the Zhou, and they kind of go in. And they're like ancient empires in China. A lot of people in the West do not believe the Xia actually existed, but the Chinese people do believe that the Xia dynasty existed, the first ancient Chinese dynasty. And then, of course, the Chinese, the Qin Shi Huang or Shi Huangdi, the great ruler, which is his title, not his name, he comes to power in about 221 BC and unifies China into its first major imperial dynasty. And in 206, his son is overthrown, and eventually a man named Liu Bang comes to power, and he establishes the Han dynasty, which is a subsidiary and contemporary of the Roman Empire, and it lasts for over 4 centuries. So the Han dynasty and the Qing dynasty is when China goes from being ancient to being imperial China, and we have that all the way until 1911. Of course, we have interruptions and interwar periods, the Three Kingdoms periods. China has been divided so many different times. What might have happened if Alexander the Great lived for 10 more years? This is part of what we were talking about in our live stream lecture the last 2 weekends, the ancient Greeks. But Alexander probably would have solidified his power, gone back and captured large sections of the Gupta Empire in India. I don't think he was done fighting them. I mean, you had the Grand Council, which was made up of 50 representatives of the 5 original nations who directed and discussed things, but I don't think that makes you a democracy. Compared to the other Native American tribes, it certainly did. Oligarchy might be a more fitting word if it was in a European context, but yeah. How do you memorize all that? I just love this information, and I love regaling it, and I love talking about it, and people bringing it to me always helps me remember it and talk about it, and I just love history, so that's what we do here at the Friendly Neighbor History. We remember, we talk, and we love history. That's my sign-off for every one of the live streams. So let's see. Other questions about history or social studies? Hopefully everyone's having a good weekend. The British Empire is technically, I don't know if they're not the largest land empire ever. The largest contiguous land empire was the Mongols. Probably the most well known is the Romans. The British had the largest in terms of population. Nearly a quarter of the world's population was under the control or influence of the British Empire at the height of its control in the early 1920s. What's your favorite age of history? I like the 18th and 19th and 20th centuries. I'm a European historian by trade, but I also study history from all over the world. So, Otter, great to see you. German, always a pleasure. Wasn't even an oligarchy. It was a hereditary system of clan members who appointed chiefs who got together in a group, ground councils to then govern the Confederacy. Yes, that's how a Confederacy works, Harry. If canceling elections and forcing civilians into military isn't a dictatorship, then what is? That would be an example of a dictatorship, sure. But yeah. If you want me to go more in depth on a topic, consider giving a super chat. That always helps the channel. If you want to any donation you give helps us build this channel and get new equipment and make things better for all of you. Because an oligarchy will be a group of people who are usually rich or have some special distinction from the others. Yes, the clan members picking them would make them an oligarchy, Harry. Let me see. Russian fear of the West and the United States, specifically from the Vladivostok expedition. Yeah, but Russia's been fearful of invaders ever since the Mongols in 1240. What is the historical record like before Alexander the Great? Or is Alexander considered sort of beginning? No, there was recorded history before then. Thucydides and Herodotus, who were writing Greek history, were writing before then. And there's ancient chronicles of different things happening. There's mythologies. There's the Iliad and the Odyssey. So most of the writings before Herodotus and Thucydides that are considered historical were writing about contemporary religion, culture, art, things like that. And so they're looked at as historical relics, but they are not histories themselves. But Herodotus and Thucydides writing about the Peloponnesian War, and Herodotus gathering these oral accounts and spreading them all throughout at the beginning of oral or recorded history. Those are considered the first real historians, and those are before Alexander. Well, they're in the middle of a war, so I can understand why that happens. And a lot of countries do conscript their people to fight, Henry. Why were the Mongols so good at invading lands such as Russia and China? Horse archery always helps. Just because you delay elections and introduce conscription does not mean you're a dictatorship. Okay, if you want me to talk about a contemporary issue like that, give me a super chat and I'll give an analysis on it. Bufadus, I've never heard of that one. Oh, geez, kitty cat, not here, not now. Let me see. Any other questions about history or social studies? I mean, in World War II, it's World War III, by the way. There's 3 world wars. Britain didn't have elections for 9 years and had mass prescription for very much every, yeah, okay. What did the Greeks eat? Olives were very popular. They're very popular throughout all the Mediterranean. Hummus, pita bread, um, orzo rice, chicken. Of course, meat is very popular. I don't know when the Greeks started curling their meat. I forget what that's called, but I mean, I asked you a question, you glossed over it in 2 words. Yes, but I thought I answered it. Um, why, why were the Mongols so good at invading lands such as Russia and China? Well, again, they were quick, they were efficient, and they were extremely good at controlling their lands because they were tolerant of the people if the people would accept them, and they were ruthlessly cruel if people would not just surrender to them. So they knew how to intimidate people. If you want me to go more in depth, if you want a longer answer from me on a particular topic, give a super chat. Mets or Marlins? I don't know, Mets. Why hasn't Normandy Beach hit from naval bombardment more? I don't know exactly why. I think it was because of they were trying to decoy. They built a decoy army. George Patton was running a decoy army in Britain to trick the Nazis into thinking they were going to attack Calais. Um, Explain the Iranian diplomat. Which Iranian diplomat? Where did wealthy Romans keep their coins? They usually had some sort of box at home. Not sure. Um, did they have a bank? They did have banks back then. They did have lines of credit. Um, Thoughts on Francisco Franco? Obviously, one of the most interesting characters of the 20th century who probably doesn't get the attention that he should. He's a case study in being able to actually keep a dictatorship going, even when that form of politics has become unpopular. Fascism isn't being a fascist is not something you want to brag about after Mussolini and Hitler. But Franco was able to stay in power, one, because he hated communism and the United States and the rest of Europe was okay with that, and two, he was able to tighten and loosen his reins on the economy, on on local government, and on the people whenever it suited him so that he could stay in power, and this is why he was in power until his death in the 1970s. So, the Medici family didn't come until the early modern period, the Renaissance. Um, I'm not going to start panning like a dog. And yes, this is my formal wear. I'm very snappy today. The ones who got beheaded, I don't know what you're talking about there. Rome had a pretty advanced banking system, so you had the local bank. Your local bank would be part of a provincial network, and the province would be a part of a wider network. So you could, in theory, move your money wherever you wanted. You'd usually have to someone there to manage it. Yep, there was a network of banking systems. If the Romans had knew anything, it was how to take care of their money. What prince? Tell us about battles in the Colosseum. They would have usually gladiatorial combat, fighting with animals, persecution of different groups. They did supposedly have sea battles there from time to time, using triremes and biremes. Ships would ram into each other. Machiavelli's the prince. So the prince is a writing by Machiavelli, another Renaissance Italian like the Medicis in the 15th century, who basically, late 15th, early 16th century, who basically encouraged rulers to be cruel and ruthless in order to rule effectively. What would you say was the military outcome of the 1973 Arab-Israeli Yom Kippur War? Israel won but made territorial concessions. It also destroyed the government of Golda Meir. It could take quite a long time for this networking to take place if you wanted to move it, from Britain to Egypt, for example, or even from Italy to Spain. I wonder, how did they huge monetary transactions back in Rome? Did you need to physically transport bags of gold and silver to make a big purchase? Probably. But there was also of course, lines of credit and stuff like that. But an example of the Mongols' ruthlessness was the diplomats sent by the Khan. Oh yes, and the Mongols didn't appreciate that very much. Taught the Iranians a lesson. Yes, basically, if the Mongols, wherever they went, if people surrendered, they would actually allow most of the people to live and continue life as they had before, as long as they paid tribute. But if people did not surrender, they would destroy entire towns, decapitate entire populations, burn everything in existence. Could Rhodesia have stayed independent? Probably not. I'm a history head myself, but I've never seen a live streamer do it. Well, calm mind, I'm glad you're here, and that's very kind of you. I really appreciate that. PBS made a TV doc on Fords about strikes in the 1930s and violence with strikebreakers, but would never mention that quite a few workers were shot dead. Any thoughts? Not too many. I'm not surprised. How were the Vikings? The Vikings are seen as brutal and violent, but most of them were actually just looking for food, and the vast majority of people in Scandinavia relied on very limited amounts of time to actually farm properly, so raiding for food was a huge reason that Vikings, which that word means Vikinger, means raider, went and did what they did. You could get loans and mortgages, yes. I think temples were used a lot, but currency lost its value as coins. Yes, they eventually started devaluing the currency so they could make more coins, but this made the coins less valuable. You should do a video on the economy and banking in the Roman Empire. Sure. I'm doing a long form video series on the Industrial Revolution for my members, and a long form video series currently for everyone on the Supreme Court. So maybe I'll get to that when I'm done. I am the son of a judge. Okay. Just how popular and important was Michael Jackson to modern music history? Extremely important in influencing modern pop, hip hop, and rap music. Probably making them more mainstream and moving rock and roll from being the mainstream music genre to secondary. Please do a he for the channel. No. When did this super chat, and I will. Why has Israel won every war? They're extremely resourceful. They know exactly the advantages they need, and they're able to win, and their military is one of the best trained in the world. When did the Silk Road come to an end? What causes its dissolution? Or did foreign trade by other routes just simply increase? Yeah, sea trade. The Europeans and Asian countries using sea trade more often made the Silk Road less and less popular, and less common to be used. Roman currency was extremely different. You had two forms of currency. In the Republic, you had the denarii and the denarii, but the denarii was only 150% weight of one. Okay. What was the drug and alcohol use like in ancient empires? The Mayans liked to boof. They liked to ingest wine to get drunk through their anuses. Believe it or not, that's actually true. What are the requirements for an area of land with people to become a country? Probably a agreed upon culture, agreed upon government, and an agreed upon society, social structure. Apparently, over time, people in Rome began weighing the coins rather than accepting them at face value. Yes. So emperors always spent money on the 2 denarii but taxed 1 denarii. Makes sense. Trump is a lot like Caesar. If you study history, you see that. I don't know how much he's like Caesar. He's definitely wanting to be in power and control, but I don't know if he's fully like Caesar. When was the beginning of the end of the Byzantines, in your opinion? I think when the Latin Empire was created in 1204, the Fourth Crusade, when the Europeans turned on the Byzantines and forever decimated any hope of reconciliation between Catholics and Orthodox, that led to the fall of the Byzantines. Alsace-Lorraine, I mean, the name is very French. It's gone back and forth. The Mayans were actually quite wild. The Romans loved to have drunken orgies, and Native Americans were in peyote, ayahuasca, all of these things. My week was fine. It's over and I get to be with you, so that's the good part. Did the Roman Empire just become the Vatican? No. I don't like that idea, but the Catholic Church assumed a lot of a social prominence, political and religious power, but not nearly as much or as enough compared to the Roman Empire. It didn't have the political control that the Romans did. I just got a 1330 on my SAT. I'm cooked. You are cooked, Neff. Since I'm Unk, you can be Neff. Were Marx and Lenin ultimately a detriment to Russia? Yes. I want to study stuff, but I'm too busy so I just watch some of these streams. Well, I appreciate that, Frog Lover. You're very kind, and watch more of my videos because I've got history on every single topic. What do you know about history? What do you want to know about history? And I'll tell you because I know an awful lot, you Nolan. But anyways, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm shocked Harst didn't say you are being disingenuous for saying you had a good week. Yes, it's crazy. It's terrible. It's almost like I said that my week was fine, but I really am lying secretly. So let's see here. We got another 40 minutes or so. So please put a question in the chat. What was the downfall of the Maginot Line? Let's not talk about Nicaea too. That's where the church banned allowed for the use of icons in worship, which became a huge controversy again during the Protestant Reformation. This is the downfall of the Maginot Line. The Nazis going through the forest nearby instead. 1330 is great, Joshua. That's a really big number. It is recorded that Fred Trump was arrested at a KKK march in the 1920s. What was the view of the KKK of the people from German background in the 1920s? A lot of white Europeans were very fond of white Americans were very fond of the Klan because it was anti-Catholic, anti-Jewish, and anti-black, and they felt that that was stealing away from their opportunities. What do you think about Hitler? Was he? Yeah, he was bad. He was very bad. Yeah, Hitler was bad. Surprise, surprise. What do you think would have happened if Arnold couldn't save John Connor from the T-1000? He wouldn't have become governor of California. Why did the Soviets lose the Winter War? Because they were Stalin. Huh? Hilarious. Hitler wasn't very nice, Jan Allen. Yes, I think Jan Allen knows that. I think he's just trolling us. Anyways, another question. Oh, jeez. You used to like asking you questions. Now it's just you fighting with your mods. I mean, I love answering questions, Otter, even especially from you. You ask such great questions. No, you're very tired. I'm very tired because of Benny's sister. Anyways, would World War I still have happened if Franz Ferdinand wasn't assassinated? That's a great question. something was going to push it into that territory. You got these alliances. You got the Austro-Hungarians trying to bully the Serbians and other Slavic peoples. The Russians don't like that. You have Germany worried about a Russia becoming technologically advanced enough to withstand a German invasion. So it was a ticking time bomb. I believe it's World War II, by the way. The First World War is the 7 Years' War. Go watch my video on that. Hars, can you put the link to my 7 Years' War video in the chat so they can watch it? That'd be great. You say you know history. Yes, I know history, and Hitler was bad. That's what history tells us. Why do the people deny the Holocaust? People deny the scope of the Holocaust, and I like what Nick Adams, the guy who made Dilbert, said. He said it's okay to question statistics and numbers, but questioning events in wholesale is just ridiculous, in my opinion. We should be allowed to question and learn about things scientifically, but I think all of the historical data and evidence points to 9 to 11 million people being killed, 6 million of whom were Jewish. That's where you... Okay, let me see here. How do you know about the depths of Hitler's Aryan fan fiction? Jeez. Franz Ferdinand was simply the spark that ignited the tension. Yep. What made James Polk a dark horse? Nobody knew him. That's what a dark horse is. Well, at least not as much as other days. No more angry mustache guy questions, everyone. I'm okay with angry mustache guy questions. I'm okay with Austrian painter questions. I'm just going to answer them in a very flat historical way. Do you have the same standard for your beliefs about Muhammad's existence? Compared to who? M. And yes, please watch my 7 Years' War video if you want to hear about World War I. Thank you, Hars. If I sent my washing machine to the technician and paid him to fix it, and he did, and the next day the same problem happened, should I go back to him? Thank you. Probably not, or at least demand your money back. I really believe that people like, that's why your country is full of Muslim refugees. You don't know anything about my country, apparently. The Holocaust standard of questioning events even happened. I mean, people questioning the Holocaust... How can you compare the Holocaust happening to Muhammad's existence? And I have serious questions, at least, about Muhammad's presence in Mecca. Muslims don't believe Muhammad wrote the Quran. They believe he recited the Quran. And with all due respect to Islam as a religion as a whole, I don't even see any evidence that he wrote the Quran, let alone recited it or was given this book by God in this completely mystical circumstance. That happened 1,400 years ago. If it did happen, we're talking about events that people who lived through it are still extant to this day. We have far more evidence. And that's true compared to any ancient event. It's apples and oranges to compare modern events to ancient events. What was the War on Terror? Talk about it. The United States' decision to punish Afghanistan and eventually overthrow Saddam Hussein because of the 9/11 terrorist attacks and Saddam's standard of accepting and promoting terrorism, ostensibly, that was the reason, is basically the United States trying to force places in the world to accept democracy because they believe that democracy was the best because they won the Cold War. And about 2 million Christians, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, if you're talking about the Holocaust, a lot of the people that were killed were indeed Christians. Slavs, homosexuals, and mentally undesirable people were all killed, as were communists and other groups. Can we count the Romani gypsies? Can we count Neanderthal handprints in France as part of the historical record? Yeah, I'd say so, at least the archaeological and anthropological record. How can Arizona stop being known as the failure state because of John McCain? It's changing its identity. I think it's going to be known as the Charlie Kirk state because that's where he was from, and his organization has such influence, especially even now after his death. I don't like the guy either, but Tick History made good videos about his Aryan fan fiction. It's crazy. Mad Libs, watch us on TikTok, not that. Was Muhammad a real person? Yes, he was, just like Jesus. Drew, I don't get your point. Was Muhammad a real person? I go back and forth on this one in all seriousness. I think there's someone that Muslims obviously revere as their founder. How much historical evidence do we have for his existence? Precious little compared to other historical figures from the same time period. There's more evidence of Buddha and Jesus existing, both of whom lived centuries before him, than there is of Muhammad. Most of the writings about Muhammad, like the Hadiths and the Sirah, come centuries later. It's just facts. And even accepting the most pro-Muslim dates, which is what every Muslim who argues about history with me ever does, you can't find extant records of Muhammad's life outside of the Quran until centuries later. And if we're to accept more liberal dates, this could be from 600 years after his life. I was trying to convince this guy that the Holocaust happened because he seems to think that there wasn't even 6 million Jews in Europe at the time. There easily was. You speak fast to hide the inconsistency in your arguments. Okay, what inconsistency in my arguments do I have? How do you define fascism? Fascism is a militaristic movement that is based in nationalism, authoritarian control. It is illiberal, anti-communist, anti-democratic, and based on using nationalism as a way to control every segment of a person's life. Do you believe the Pangea is real? Yes. Do you believe in God? Yes. I'm not going to say which one or how I believe in him. The same guy also thinks that submarines don't exist and they're all conspiracy by the government. I think you're going to have a hard time convincing him. Are you familiar with the French philosopher Lepotam? It sounds a little familiar. Why don't you make debates and podcasts? You're literally born for this. Thank you, Drew. I appreciate it. That's very kind of you. But, I mean, I want to do podcasts. I want to get more into my studio. I'm using the funds that we get in this channel. So if you want to become a member and get early access and extra shorts and extra videos, consider that. But no pressure. But yeah, I mean, I'm born to talk about history. What happened to the Olmecs? Died out, climate change, climatological factors, migration, other natives destroying them, very similar to the Maya. What do Hindus believe? Hindus believe in a series of different gods. They are mainly polytheistic, but they do believe in some sort of cohesion between these gods. They believe in reincarnation. Most of them are vegetarian or vegan. So there's a couple of things they believe in. I don't have TikTok. Tick History is a fellow YouTube channel, and he has gone in-depth on fascism, Hitler, and Nazism. Makes me LOL at these groypers even harder than I was. Well, I'm glad he's punishing the groypers. What patterns emerge when comparing the collapse of the past great powers like Rome, the Abbasid Caliphate, and Ming Dynasty, and how these patterns reveal vulnerabilities? Great question. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes a lot. Human nature is malleable at the edges, but in my opinion, steel plated at the center. And I think that empires collapse due to corruption and greed, due to low birth rates, due to an inability to defend themselves properly, and basically by resting on their laurels militarily, economically, and socially. USA has some socialism and capitalism, and most countries could be wrong. I don't think that having a police force or social security makes you a socialist. The same way I don't think that having free market, free enterprise makes you a laissez-faire capitalist. Shaya al-Burqa, what about it? Bukhari 5133, what are you referring to? Is the America right or left more radical? Is the American right or left more radical? I think the American radical right has been pretty much silenced and submerged. I think the American radical right is stuff like the Klan, and some of these neo-fascist groups, white supremacist groups, the Richard Spencers of the world. I think everybody unilaterally condemns it. I think the American left is just as radical, but is less condemned. Looking at something like Antifa, or not even Antifa, but fringe groups of Antifa that are promoting violence and lawlessness. Running McCain and later Romney as a primary candidate was such a stupid miscalculation. It's no surprise he lost. GOP is so bad at running their organization. Well, they didn't have the nationalist front that Trump created that actually has helped them a lot politically. They're outpacing Democrats in voter registration by huge numbers. I don't talk politics in great detail. If you want my political analysis on something, again, give a super chat. But I do daily news videos, so I stay on top of all of this stuff. Please go check those out. Harsh, can you put last week's news in the chat? As they're ever harsh, they were equally radical. Anti-freedom of speech, right? Yes, pretty much. Is nationalism inherently bad? I don't think so. Do you know Majapahit history? Not off the top of my head. How many people claim to be the son of God prior to Jesus? It's a common claim. Augustus Caesar made it. The Soviet Union also utilized nationalism. I don't get how nationalism is the delineating factor. Nationalism is the engine that makes it go. Different political groups use nationalism. Fascism it requires nationalism on all fronts in order to even survive. Hey Louis, good to see you. What was life like on a ship during the Age of Sail? How were the ships governed? Typically, I'm not sure exactly how they were governed. It was usually, unless you were getting enough vitamin D, you were exposed at risk of exposure to the elements, scurvy, and all sorts of other diseases. Yes, nationalism does hold people together. It's like in my opinion, nationalism, if we look at history, can be a dangerous elixir. It can be potent to create new and powerful and great nations, Italy, Greece, and Germany in the 19th century, but it can also be used in its most extreme form to promote racism, exclusivism, nativism, and all sorts of other horrible punishments. Look at the Klan in the United States, and look at Germany in the 1930s. My household is right-leaning, so it feels like the left is more radical, but if I was in a left-leaning house, I'd probably believe the right was more radical. I don't think it's as subjective as all that, but I agree with you in that. Shared language and religion, there you have culture. What do you think our future will be within 50 years? Will governments control more aspects of everyday lives? The fear of the founding fathers was the government would increase its control over the masses, so I think that's a possible fear. Good evening, Gunyan. Good to see you. We're talking about history and social studies. Um, I would donate if I wasn't a broke child. Fair enough, but liking and subscribing is good enough. You low-key look like Charlie Kirk, bro. Okay, I don't think I look anything like Charlie Kirk just because I'm a white guy. I've gotten other comparisons that are better. Empires collapsed due to America's policy also. Like the Soviet Union, yeah. What policy are you talking about? Yeah. What's the background picture? It's a Russian market in the late 17th century. I think. Oh, it's actually a Russian shipyard, and these are Peter the Great's builders building the Russian Navy in the early 1700s. What evidence is there that John of Patmos was the same as the Apostle John? This is a belief by Christians that the last book of the New Testament, the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, was written by John, who was one of Jesus' apostles, who supposedly lived to be an old man. There's not a huge amount of evidence. Most evidence of what happened to the apostles after the life and death of Jesus is recorded in two books. The book of the Acts of the Apostles, which one of them wrote. There's the writings of Paul, which talk about it a little bit. And of course, there's Eusebius, who was writing in the early 4th century after Christianity was legalized by Constantine. A church historian by the man of Eusebius decided to make it his goal to write down the history of the church based on traditions that he had heard and oral traditions that were obviously extremely important to the religion as it had been heavily persecuted before. Legitimacy and legalization gave Eusebius the ability to actually write a chronicle. So most of the stories of all the apostles dying except John is from Eusebius, and there's some traditions before. Peter being crucified upside down, for instance. Other than that, not a huge amount of evidence. There is a significant amount of evidence that the Christians were persecuted heavily, though, until the 4th century. Believe in Mother Nature? Well, Rochelle, I'm glad you do. And Tanya, thank you for giving the gift membership to TI. You are so kind. Would BRICS or UN win in a world war? I don't know. I don't see the BRICS being outside of the UN. It's more NATO might be a better question. Could a ruthless authoritarian have saved the Roman Empire and revitalized it? That's what Diocletian tried to do and Constantine tried to do, but they didn't do it by being ruthless despots. Ruthless despots are really good at getting short things done over a small amount of time, not over fixing the whole problem. The real fixers in the Roman Empire throughout its history were benevolent dictators. Trajan would be a great example of this, Aurelian, Constantine. I don't think Augustus ever made the claim that he was the son of God. I think that came later when he was dead. No, they believed that Julius Caesar was a god and that Augustus was his son, making him the son of God, and then Tiberius was the son of God. And it was seen this is huge for Christian theology, by the way, because the son of God was on his way to being God too. And so these claims about Jesus mirror the Roman imperial claims of the context of the 1st century Judeans, who were obviously part of the burgeoning Roman Empire in the Pax Romana under Augustus. Can you be racist to white people? Yeah, you can be racist to anyone for any reason. Racism is hating somebody and mistreating them because they are physically different than you in one way or another, based usually on ethnic characteristics, most notably their skin color. Antifa isn't a bad thing because they're against racism and fascism, which is a good thing. Yes, you're basing them totally off of their name. It is good to be against racism and fascism. That doesn't mean that there haven't been violent problems with them in the past. Why is the Last Supper called Last Supper instead of Lord's Night? Funny one. It was a Jewish Seder, actually. Are you an Aryan, a 10 Hyperborea? I don't know what that is. I'm going to say no. What did the old world use instead of potatoes and tomatoes? Onions, leeks, stuff like that. And eventually they started growing potatoes and tomatoes after they got them from the New World. Are you a based Aryan pilled virile? No. Go back and watch Nick Fuentes if you want that nonsense. Can you talk about the VOC, the Dutch East India Company? Yeah, Belisarius, good to see you, by the way. The VOC was one of the first major joint stock companies. Joint stock companies would be formed by different companies looking to invest in business, cash crops, international trade, and seafaring during the age of exploration in the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries. And before the English got good at it, the Dutch were pretty good at it themselves. After gaining independence, and their VOC went to the East Indies and really took off as they gained more and more independence from Spain during the 80 Years' War, 1568 to 1648. Then and afterwards, it's known as the Dutch Golden Age. They eventually would help them colonize Indonesia. and they traded with China, India, and Japan. They were the only Europeans allowed to trade with Japan after the Tokugawa shogunate in 1642 banned foreigners. Ships at sea in the age of snail consider themselves extensions of their empire, Spain. That's true. So basically, they govern themselves according to military rule. Yeah, they were extensions of the government. And the conquistadors that we all know and many of us hate were not the top military units. These were thugs who the Spanish wanted to get rid of and send to the New World. Do you think Jesus was just a really charismatic guy in the right place at the right time? Could be. How can America overcome imperialism, white guilt? Huh? I don't know if America needs to overcome that. I mean, guilt is a part of life. What was St. Nick's impact on Christianity? Not a huge amount. Obviously, it has more of an impact in the development of culture, of middle-class culture in America that leads to the celebration of Christmas and obviously Coca-Cola and branding and all of that. It's more his influence on capitalism, really, but he was just he was a Christian saint in the early 4th century. He was known for throwing gold and gifts into people's stockings through the window. He was stuff like that. Watch my video on the origins of Christmas. Harsh, maybe you can find that video. And I have videos on the history of almost every holiday, including Samhain, or as you call it, Halloween, which is coming up very soon. In the UK, it's a common phrase that if you're going to prison, you say that you've gone to the Nick, but you also have Saint Nick, which is a positive term referring to center. Okay. Fascism wasn't nearly as racist as Nazi Germany. That was due to Hitler's Aryan anti-fiction, but yet you still lump them in the same thing called fascism. There's a militarism in fascism, there's a nationalism in fascism, and usually that leads to either nativism or racism or both. It is kind of weird, Harry. Communism causes problems, fascism solves them. Why I don't get how just extreme nationalism makes things fascist. Extreme nationalism mixed with authoritarian government, end of democracy, you're only focusing on one aspect. You have to combine all of these things together. Are you a Freemason? Yes. Sure, ask me anything about Freemasonry. My pleasure. Do you know the history of the first English translated Bible? Wycliffe, he was a Lollard, he was a reformer, he was eventually killed, but he translated the Bible into English. Back then, the church was only responsible for translations of the Bible, and copies of the Bible were really hard to make. He did this before the printing press, by the way. Of course, eventually, William Tyndale completed his Bible, and that was in 1534, and he was killed for that because he was going against the church, which was still run by no longer the Pope, but the king, after Henry VIII made the Supremacy Act. Is Zacharias Sitchin a grifter? I have no idea. That's the guy with the Anunnaki. It's an interesting concept. You look at ancient peoples, and they all thought that aliens and gods and deities and monsters and giants visited them from the stars. So, what do you think of a tomato debate? I say tomato, but I also say potato. It's weird. Does Benny's hot sister have aura? I have the aura, and that's why I have Benny's sister. Harry, I was just thinking tomato, and you wrote the comment. Did you know the left-right dichotomy was invented in revolutionary France because the pro-king faction, they weren't pro-king. They were pro-constitution, either constitutional monarchy or letting the king live. That doesn't make them pro-king. They were the more moderate reformers, men like Marquis de Lafayette. They sat on the right side and during the National Assembly and on the left side. I have a Substack article. You guys can go read about that. Do you know the first completed I already answered that, Anthony. Same wavelengths or something. Can you talk about the Bandeirantes making their way into the Brazilian interior and how they did it? Don't know a huge amount about that, so I can't speak to it, Valseris. My stepdad is Scottish. One day we were, good to see you, E-Dog, talking, and he said the Scotland and Irish people were descended from goat. Wow. Is there not true? Yeah, please, E-Dog, focus. Thank you for your support. I0, really appreciate you. Why no more multi-generational families? Why do people choose to leave home? It's actually going back the other way. Young people, because of economic costs, are staying with their parents longer and longer. Since we have a live stream on Friday, which is Halloween, you should dress up as the scariest thing ever, the Antichrist, aka Woodrow Wilson. That's not hard. I would just need to get glasses. The horn-rimmed glasses. E-Dog is very true, and they're still up to it today. Do you think if the Crusaders had been more aggressive and tried to conquer more than just the Holy Land, such as Egypt, they would have been successful in Christianizing those lands? They did try to conquer Egypt in multiple times. King St. Louis IX, who was the king of France, was kidnapped when he tried to defeat the Mamelukes in, I think, 1250, or the Ayyubids. But, yeah, it would have been interesting. The Second Crusade was kind of trying to get more land, and that didn't work. What kind of riz did you tell Benny's hot sister about history? I told her she was my Josephine, and I would go to Elba for her. There you go. If you're pro-constitutional monarchy, you are pro-monarchy, which means you're pro. They either wanted a constitutional monarchy or a national assembly. They did not want the radicalism of the Jacobins. They were not all monarchists. Wycliffe started and Miles Coverdale completed it. Coverdale completed it, but this was also after Tyndale. Coverdale was after Tyndale. What are your thoughts on the supported Freemason letters of Albert Pike on World War III from 1800s? Don't know. I agree with that, but nowadays fascism is shorthand for racism, a la Nazism, but looking at Italy, they didn't have really any of that racism. It was definitely we want people out of our country. Italy is for Italians. That's part of it. There is a racial ethos to fascism. Read some on the Portuguese bandit. They have some crazy stories. We'll do so. How am I a chump? He was drinking Indian pale ale beer at the time. In the chat for Benny's mom, or is it W's because it's Friendly's girlfriend? Yeah, okay. Have you seen, I didn't say she was my girlfriend. Have you seen the movie Gangs of New York? Was it really like that? Haven't seen it. From the parts that I have seen or heard about, it's an exaggeration of how violent the gangs were, but there was a lot of gangs. The Irish were an extremely organized political machine. Tammany Hall was functioning, and they were could be extremely militant, extremely corrupt. There was a lot of tension between different labor groups and different immigrant groups in the late 19th century. Why were the British such a small island, such a successful empire? The Navy so the English have an incredible ability not to be involved, to involve and disinvolve themselves from European politics because they're not on the continent themselves. It gives them the leeway to go off on their own. This also gives them the incentive to build up a navy to defend their island from larger aggressors like France. And the Navy obviously becomes the pride of the English in the 17th and 18th centuries. But yeah. Barbary pirates were Muslim corsairs from the North African coast, also known as the Barbary Coast, who operated from the 16th to 19th centuries. Yes. And America's first military conflict was against them. The reason the Marines have that white collar is so their heads wouldn't be cut off. Can you please talk about the history of Friuli, Italy, northeast Italy? Any info on history of this region near Austria and Slovenia, even as back to Julius Caesar? It was a land for the Lombards to settle in. Most of northern Italy was when the Roman Empire in the west started to crumble. And it's also where most of the fighting during the Italian Wars for Independence occurred with Austria, and it's also where most of the fighting in World War II occurred. There was an entire front between the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Italians, who joined in 1915, betraying the Austro-Hungarians and the Germans to fight with the British, the French, and later the Americans. I'm not surprised that there were. I'm not saying that fascism is inherently racist. I'm saying that racism can be a part of that. Italians were far less likely to engage in anti-Jewish actions the Nazis wanted than the French were. Okay. What is your lover? What is it? Your lover instead of your girlfriend? We also got very good exchanging limited resources in exchange for quite a bit back. That's true. It's called. What was the Valentine's Day Massacre? Al Capone and the South Side Gang trapped and killed a bunch of George Moran's soldiers in 1929 on Valentine's Day. You should actually dress up as Woodrow Wilson for Halloween live stream. Okay, maybe. Which is why Britain usually had the most greatest dips ever in the 1800s and 1900s. Agreed, you should dress up as... Okay, fine. What was the relation between Morocco and the Ottoman Empire? For a long time, the Ottomans controlled it, but I'm trying to remember when but the France and Great Britain really did a number in Morocco, Algeria, and Egypt in severing their ties to the Ottomans. Why does Prussia sound like Russia? I don't know why. I used to know. It's because it's close enough to it's very close to Russia. So, did you learn history in school, or was it more on your own? Both. History. So, is the interest of history. When did you start looking this ugly? I don't know. Your mom didn't think I was ugly, Stefan. Don't delete the message. I was having fun with Stefan. Or actually, I wasn't having fun with Stefan, but anyways. Someone else in Stefan's family. What was Homer's Odyssey? It's the writing by Homer, the ancient Greek poet. Go watch my Greek history live streams from the last 2 weeks to learn more about it. It's the story of how Odysseus got home after the Trojan War ended. He was a king of a Greek city-state called Ithaca. Can you talk about the British Burma Wars? Britain, I think that's when Britain conquered Burma. I think it was in the 1850s. Not a huge expert on that. And of course, like many other Asian countries like Indochina countries and Indonesia. They demanded and got their independence after they were done fighting for and dying for the British in the Third World War, or what you call World War II. Have you ever been down bad for a shorty? No. Let me see here. Harry was on board with him dressing up as Woodrow Wilson for the Halloween Live. What was Homer's Odyssey? I already answered that. Do you agree? Nerds are hot. I consider myself a geek personally, but whatever category I am, then yes, I believe that category is hot. So basically, in World War One, Italy was with Austria so that they would be protected from France. Then World War Two, it went belly up with the Germans again. Why the betrayal? Austria wasn't Austria-Hungary in World War One. In my opinion, the 7 Years' War, Austria, France, and Russia tried to stop Prussia and Frederick the Great. In the Second World War, or the Great War, Italy had an alliance, a defense alliance, meaning that if Germany and Austria-Hungary were attacked, they would defend them. But they weren't obligated to go and fight with them just because they decided to go to war on their own. And since they were the aggressors, Italy sat out of it. And then a year into it, just decided to try to get more land from Austria-Hungary in northeastern Italy and joined the Allies, or the Entente: France, Britain, Russia, and later the United States. No, Morocco was not under the Ottoman Empire. What ancient civilization would you choose to live in? Probably ancient Rome. Because France was going to Xenia and stepped in Italy. Okay. Brosa 9 out of 10. Thanks, I guess. Barbary pirates attacked Ireland in the sack of Baltimore in 1631 when they raided the village of Baltimore and Cork and abducted 237 people to be sold in slavery. Yep. Murad raids, Barbary coast pirates. They could be pretty brutal, and they were enslavers. Yeah. That would make me look like the Mr. Peanut. So, let me see here. Hi, Nam, man. You can call the 7 Years' War the First World War? Yes. And I stand by it. I was just wondering, at what point did Canada become a colony of Britain, and was it taken by force or no? A lot of it was won over in the 7 Years' War after Britain defeated France. Can we talk about World War II? I'd call it World War III probably, but yes, Naaman. Say something nice about Herbert Hoover. He saved millions of lives. He saved more lives than any U.S. president ever did by raising money to help the starving Belgians and Russians after the end of the Great War. Thank you for joining us, Grizzly from South Africa. It's great to have people from all over the world here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. They've intercepted a Russian military jet near the Alaskan base. Oh, great. Hey, I'm a historian. I've seen this before. Are you a Buffalo Bills fan? You guys all know and should know that I am a Steelers fan. And Hungary recently intercepted the Russian jets near the NATO border. So it's not just Poland. The Russians are just daring for it. What do you think of Nazis? They're bad. Whom you support? Axis or Allies? Allies. They should have gone and stayed right away from Austria-Hungary. The Austrians have always helped before. The Austrians were pretty self-interested. And the Italians had to fight the Austrians to gain their independence in the 1850s and 60s. What collapsed the USSR? Pressure from the United States, internal reforms, the ability to self-critique eventually led to total societal collapse. You call World War I the Great War or World War II? I call the Great War World War II. What would be your occupation in ancient Rome? Would you be an Emperor Claudius? I'd love to be another Emperor Claudius. Claudius doesn't get enough love. Do you think nuking Japan was right? I don't know if right is the right term. I think it was correct. What I mean by that is right carries a moral weight. I think it was the strategically correct decision to make at that time in the war, and I think it actually morally and ethically is generally better than a prolonged invasion or blockade of Japan, which would have caused probably even more suffering to the Japanese people themselves, believe it or not. 2-1 versus 3-0 by the Bills. Steelers or dog water. I don't really care. I just wait for the Bills to go to the playoffs and then not go any farther than that. According to you, who was the best U.S. president ever? Lincoln. Do you know the apartheid in the past here in South Africa, the one of separation of whites and blacks? Yes, very familiar with it. So, started by the Dutch, eventually ended when the Dutch came around and the Africans got Mandela into office. What do you think of Ukraine shelling East Ukraine for 8 years long? Well, part of that is because Russia has occupied those territories. That's a huge reason why that's happened, Froggy. If you want me to talk more about it, consider giving a super chat. The Bolshevik Revolution was a Jewish coup. No, it wasn't. It was a coup. It was a coup, but it wasn't a Jewish coup. Do you think? Let me see here. You think that things would have been different had the Crusades been successful? They were successful for 90 years. The first one was. Yes, of course they would be different. I mean, you probably would have had most of the Middle East returning to Christianity. Lincoln was a dictator. Lincoln was an aggressive and imperial president. That doesn't make him a dictator. Claudius was emperor and historian. Did you read Robert Graves? I haven't read it, but I've seen the miniseries. It's brilliant. I, Claudius. It's so good. Even though it's 50 years old, it's incredible. Tell me the best war USA fought and like interest in their profit. Probably both world wars are close there. It made the U.S. really powerful, really rich, really important. Until worst war USA fought. Probably Afghanistan and Vietnam. It destroyed a lot of America's national prestige. Do you think we are on the cusp of World War III or World War IV? It could be. Russia is toying with it. And there doesn't seem to be any peace coming with Russia and Ukraine. I don't think the Russians have what it takes to last in a war, and I don't think China's ready for a world war either. Have you read Caesar's biography? Yes, parts of it. Hi, Axel. The Austro-Hungarians couldn't even pretend to like Italians for more than 5 years for the interest of their work domination. I mean, they really did lose it after Prince Metternich left, didn't they? Yeah, more or less. But you gotta love Clemens von Metternich. But it's Franz Josef, and I like Franz Josef. I understand wanting to avenge your son. I don't think Franz Josef was a bad ruler. It is good. It's interesting talking about how he defeats the Gauls. It's basically just him pouring Gatorade on himself. What do you think USA cost more, Vietnam War or Afghan? In terms of modern money, Afghan. I think proportionally Afghan too. Is Pakistan another Yugoslavia? No. Pakistan doesn't have the issue of balkanization, of just throwing all of these races together. It's conflict. Yugoslavia did not have conflicts with a large exterior enemy. Pakistan does. Trump can't pull it off. He's out of his depth dealing with Putin. I think he's kind of done with it. I think he's over it. They'll keep selling stuff to NATO, and the war will continue. Sad. I was hoping for peace, but it didn't come. Yeah, I don't think Trump thinks that, Harry. Do you think USA will reclaim its base in Afghanistan? That would be interesting if they could get background, but they're going to have to give some sort of concession to the Taliban, and I thought we didn't negotiate with terrorists, but who knows? Raided Iceland twice, first in 1607 and more famously in 1627, and the 1627 raid led by the Dutchman Murid Rep. Thank you for sharing that. Not surprised. Barbary pirates were everywhere. Will the USA realistically defend Taiwan? They are internationally ambiguous about defending Taiwan, but China have stated they will take Taiwan. They want Taiwan. But they want to see how much the USA is willing to risk it. As long as the USA is willing to risk it for the biscuit with Taiwan, China will stay away from Taiwan. You don't think that he's in a reality TV show? I mean, come on. The guy basically, he has his cabinet worship him during his televised cabinet meetings. That's not, yeah. Every president has had his cabinet overwhelmingly support most of what he does. And the thing is that Trump can't win when it comes to his cabinet. If his cabinet hates him, if his cabinet has any dissension, then all it is, oh, it's falling apart, it's chaos, it's disorder, it's collapsing in front of our eyes. If his cabinet loves him, oh, they're just yes men doing whatever they want. Harry, you're just proving you just believe whatever the news tells you. And it's not that I don't like that, it's that I dislike the lack of critical thinking. He also travels around the world stage like he's an emperor and ramble on about however everyone else's country is crap. You're just mad because the UK is in decline. Brian, I do have some of them. I mean, yeah. Sister, your cousin, all that stuff. Next Reichstag fire? I hope not. That'd be terrible to use that for the enabling act. Yes, but did any of those presidents televise their cabinet meetings and then proceed to go around the table and have everyone worship them like some god? No. Actually, yes. Cabinet members consistently talk about what the president is doing and consistently shower praise on what the administration is doing. I mean, it's one of the most diverse belief. I'm not trying to defend Trump constantly. I don't even want to talk politics. This is a history channel, Harry. This is a Wendy's. Yeah, no, the UK is in decline. You guys are about to be lapped by Poland, so stop it, Harry. But anyways, the United States is not about to be lapped economically by Poland, but the UK is, so stop. I don't know, Mohammed. Why do you go on YouTube looking for people like that? So anyways, we negotiate with plenty of terrorists. They just need to work with us before they act. Fair enough. What will happen if the nuclear bombs from the world wars that are found by the wrong individuals like thieves? Who knows if they'll even be effective? I hope they aren't found. No, we're talking about your cousin, Brian. Let me see. It's called cabinet union, important part of running a democracy. It's true. The UK's cabinet, are you going to have a bunch of people disagreeing with Starmer all the time? The foreign secretary? The exchequer? Are they going to be disagreeing with Starmer all the time? Because if it is, then that's chaos. But if they don't agree, but if they do agree, then they're just worshiping him, apparently. They're just lapdogs for him. I'm saying the standard with Trump that's unfair to him is that he can't win no matter what he does. That doesn't mean that he always wins or he's always right or he doesn't do stupid stuff, because he does. But the standard of he can't win either way is how the media treats him, and that is ridiculous nonsense. You can't. That is anti-democratic, in my opinion. But you have a diverse cabinet, you have a diversity of thought, and you're going to get differences in it because of that. And that's actually not something that we're used to seeing, believe it or not. Lincoln, I'm not going to compare Trump to Lincoln in any other way, shape, or form, and I don't think that the two men are alike in many ways. But Lincoln chose people he disagreed with. It's a pretty interesting thing. UK also doesn't elect orange people as their prime minister. You're just mad, bro. You're just mad that Poland's going to be doing better than you in a few years. How did Greece rebuild from the 2008 economic collapse? Huge amounts of help from European countries. Yes, yes, it's not a good faith argument. Maybe that's why it triggers me, because it's not a good faith argument. I don't like the bad faith arguments we make about people just because we don't like their politics. You just don't like them. That's all it is. Now back to history. I think Trump is the best leader in the world currently. Okay, great. Let's not get crazy here. Do you think claiming Afghan base be a good decision for the U.S. may trigger a war? The U.S. has Ramstein in Germany. I can understand why the USA might want it back. It's kind of going against the whole America First narrative, though. What presidents has Billy Graham influenced, and how did he influence presidents to make the specific decisions, like the Pledge of Allegiance, for example? Graham was influential in being a leader of a religious right and an anti-communist. And of course was heavily influential on President Reagan with the pro-life movement gaining steam and the religious right and the moral majority becoming a big section of the Republican Party in the 1970s and 80s. And just to point out, Poland will not be richer than the United Kingdom. Yes, they will. Yes, they will. Both of those things that I've told you are true. You're just mad. History is misogynistic. Why not history? Just goofing. Hilarious. History comes from the Latin word for story, historia. I have heard that Trump may try to change the Constitution to get his third term. He's not going to get anywhere. That's just some stupid bluster. History has also shown that their economic boom is going to fade away within the next 2 or 3 years. No, history doesn't show that, because that you're making a prediction based on another model. History is showing, if you want to go with this, history shows what's going to happen immediately in the future and without any question whatsoever, without any alteration or differentiation, then Britain's economy is going to go into the tank. You don't like that, so you're mad, so you spend all of your time arguing with an American who happens to be a historian and complaining about an American president who you don't live under while your own government slowly collapses. Sorry, Harry, because that's how you talk about the United States. Everything Britain does is seen in the best possible light, and everything America does is seen in the worst possible light. I don't like either of those things. I don't put American history on blast because I know better. And I don't put British history on blast because I know better. Yes, exactly, Daniel. I do agree. A lot of Trump stuff is just trolling. Some of it's funny, some of it's stupid. Opinion on George Orwell. One of the most fascinating individuals, one of the people who turned me into a free speech absolutist, who basically gave me the idea that you should be allowed to say whatever you want no matter what, unless you're trying to actually hurt people. So yeah, I mean, our country's already collapsed. We were the world superpower. Economy was in recession for 40 years. Can't really get much worse than that. Yes, 2 words. Keir Starmer. There you go. Even the Labour don't like him no more. Trump would easily win a 4th term, but he's not running. He's a master troll. He does troll. And some of the stuff is funny, but it's just crazy. Take on slavery. Slavery has existed everywhere, Ferdinand. Everywhere. We've had slavery in every part of the world. Chattel slavery based on race is almost exclusive to the West, because the West had the technology to interact on a large, continuous scale with the Africans and thus enslave a huge number of their people. Sin means missing the mark in Latin. I know that. At least I get Friendly History to change his view about Woodrow Wilson. You're just complaining. It's not working. Yeah, Harsh, you complain too. When will the U.S. manifest our destiny to Mars? Ask Elon Musk. I'm tired. Do you think the CIA's communist bogeyman back during the Cold War would have genuinely destabilized global geopolitics like they claimed had they not intervened? I do think communism has a destabilizing influence. Look at the results of what it does when it gets into a country. And seeing that on a massive scale in country after country would have led to untold amounts of suffering and death in the world, and it did in places like Cuba and China. However, I think the United States obviously did more harm than help in many of these cases by just saying, we'll put anyone in power and let them stay in power. Manuel Noriega is a great example of this because he's not a communist. But anyone who starts to flirt with with leftism, we will get rid of, even if they're not really a communist. Kwame Nkrumah, Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran. Islam is a very Arab exceptionalism and superiority. Yes, but consider the fact that the vast majority of Muslims are not Arab. Why did island nation Timor split? Not sure. A few Britishers gave us back our $45 trillion looted treasury from India. Oh, jeez. Oh, we got an Indian fighting with a Brit. All right, Harry. You brought this on yourself. Oh, what do you like most about Thomas Sowell? Have you read any of his works? What has he said that you like the most about history? I really like Thomas Sowell in the sense of I think that he's very much a man who just tries to tell things the way they were. He's interesting. I don't share my political perspectives here on the channel. I just don't. I don't agree with everything he says, obviously, but I like that it's a very candid, data-driven way in which he assesses problems. And I think his narrative, the thing I like most that he's said historically, although he's not a historian, is the idea of black culture in the South of the United States developing as an extension and derivative of white cracker culture from Northern England, Scotland, and Ireland, where they were less educated, less literate, and far more given. Lynchings were common in England long before any English person saw a black person. So I think his work on white liberals and black rednecks is a fascinating theory. I think it's mostly true. I don't agree with everything he says, though, and I'm not going to tip my hand anymore. So yeah. And Reform UK isn't even going to win next election. They're just going to be the largest party. It's going to be a hung parliament. Yes, which just indicates one word: collapse. You Brits can't even get a government. At least us Americans can get a government. You may not like it, but we get it. Yes, I have a economy worth 3.3 trillion, and the Indians and the British do not owe the Indians $45 trillion. That's a huge exaggeration. According to AI, the founding fathers were black. Oh, jeez. Ulysses S. Grant has an amazing story. He does. Too bad that doesn't include his presidency. The United States was forced to pay significant tribute payments to the Barbary states, which was a controversial and costly practice. Interesting. What do you know about Brazilians? Obviously founded by the Portuguese in the late 15th century, basically by them just taking more and more land that was supposed to be part of the Spanish from the Treaty of Tordesillas, but obviously Brazil gained its independence when Dom Pedro basically told his parents to shove off in 1821 after the Napoleonic Wars. So I know a little bit about it. Do you think that the native removals would still have been as rushed and violent? Possibly. I got an interesting one for you. How do you think the early to mid-19th century would have been America's if Jackson's assassination attempt was successful? That's a great question. First presidential assassination attempt, 1835. I don't know. I think you would have had Van Buren, and I think Van Buren would have just been a rubber stamp for Jackson like he was in IRL. So maybe not as much of a delay as you think. Fingertips on the hips, as I say. Got to do a tight grip. Okay, you're just saying. And we would have a government. It would just be a minority government, which is pretty common across Europe. Yes, a government. Yes, I get it. A government not of the people, by the people, or for the people. Exactly. Have you decided on which language you were going to learn? I remember you said a while ago that you wanted to access source material in other languages. Probably Russian. What did you like about William Wilberforce? What was so special about him? His commitment to ending slavery, obviously. Yes, you directly elect someone who appoints a government. It's not hard. If we directly elect the prime minister, we would have a government. Yes, if you only elected a prime minister who was competent. Sorry, you take pock shots at Americans all the time, so I'm just taking pock shots at the British. You were the first to recognize most of South America, which is why most of South America preferred London over Washington for several decades. Yes, fascinating. Don't care. Why was Nintendo? I love Britain. I love British history. I love British society. I don't hate Keir Starmer. I don't hate British politicians. I wouldn't necessarily be reform or conservative if I was in Britain. What I'm saying is the lionization of, my whole point is that the lionization of anyone's country because of sheer patriotism, sheer nationalism, mixed with socialism, because we know Harry is a national socialist, is a blind spot if you are going to study history seriously or any social sciences. You have to be able to critique your own society. It is something that is a Western part of how I think about these things. But yeah. Well, who do you like more, Harry or me? Jeez, I can't pick. One of you it's either one of you or the other who's ticking me off. Why was Nintendo, a Japanese company, able to so successfully capture the everyday American household in the 80s and after the preceding video game crash? I think they just made games that were easy to play and fun. So I was wrong once here. U.S. wins more than U.K. in hack. Oops. Okay. Hassan, you're a racist guy from Turkey, right? Oh, jeez. Britain was the first to to recognize their independence. That's true. So let me see. As an Irishman, I find it funny you putting the boot into Harry. Yes. Whenever Harry wants to talk about how the British are superior and never get anything wrong, I always point out the Irish potato famine. Um, yeah. The Mau Mau uprising was handled horrendously. Yes. And the way Britain is handling itself right now, would you think that that's a good thing? Just because you want to complain about the Orange Man, you have other problems. What's good for the goose apparently is not good for the gander. Um, anyways, is Jesus a well documented as a historical figure? Yes. There's literal reality in which Yugoslavia worked out. I think it worked out under Tito. Yeah, to calculate between 1765 and 1938, Britain extracted resources from India worth about $45 trillion. I don't agree with the estimates. I don't think that's true. And more importantly, you have to look at it as if that's gross one way. It doesn't actually take into account the infrastructure and the buildup of Indian civilization that the British contributed to as well. And until 1857, the British India Company was on charge. It's a major mistake for the UK. So was joining the European Economic Community. Yes, you're allowed. You recognize the mistakes. You just listing that you can know mistakes doesn't mean that you are over lionizing your country. If Trump was killed, what would have happened? Vance probably would have become president. What if the historical answer to the population decline? Societal collapse and decay. Do you think Muhammad existed? I go back and forth. I'm not 100% sure. Yes. The Washington Naval Treaty should never have been signed, and we should have walked out, but we didn't. The Bretton Woods Conference was playing a bad hand badly, like it was just a disaster. Do you know about Robert Maxwell pressured Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev to cancel the contract between ELOG and Nintendo concerning the rights to the game Tetris? Fascinating. Thank you for sharing that, Biz. Okay. Anyways, I'm going to sign off. I've been going just over an hour. Once again, more than an hour just for you guys. This did wake me up a bit, so that's fun. Why is there so much hate of Pakistan and UK? Why is there so much hate of UK and Pakistan? A lot of British people do not like the fact that there are more brown people in their country. It's that simple. Yes, that's a very true point. And India wasn't one united country in 1765. Thank you for mentioning that, Belisarius. Say one nice and bad thing about me and Harry. You don't know one bad thing about you. You don't know what disingenuous means. Harry doesn't know when to stop. Hars, you can put the social media handles in the chat, and Harry knows a lot about history, even stuff that I don't know. So, great stuff from both of you. I can't do it without you guys. Show some love to my moderators, except the Brit. And tomorrow I'm sure we'll have Hate Hars Day. So, anyways, the Pakistanis hate the Indians. Geez. Populations are declining all over the world. Will plateau? Yes, most likely. Not just because they're brown. It's because a large portion of them are antithetical. There is cultural drift. I will say that, to be sure. It's not just racism. All right. India wasn't one united country in 19... Okay. Yes, I know that. I'm very well aware. Anyways, okay. Great. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend if you're not going to join us again. But join us. Vote for the live stream lecture topic for Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And join us tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern for another hour of Q&As. So... Yes, that's the nice thing I'm going to say about you, Hars. I'm sorry, it might be disingenuous. We'll just use that as a filler word because you don't know what that means. Why didn't Gandhi wear shoes? Because he was Indian, and lots of Indians don't wear shoes. Take care. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and hopefully you'll join us for the Q&A part 2 tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, and then, of course, on Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, we have a live stream lecture. Have a great rest of your evening, and as always,